Every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. This purpose is a daunting one, given that so many of our people have been brainwashed to believe that our liberation lies within the pages of a Bible written by our most ungodliest enemies and that was brutally beaten into the blood soaked minds of our ancestors. Such a belief makes no sense at all. It's in fact an idiotic one. But nonetheless, the minds of millions of our people have been brainwashed to believe that the Bible provides the path to our liberation. Many have also been brainwashed to believe that our collective mindsets have been distorted to think in ways that serves the white society through a slave syndrome myth. A myth that presents what would in fact be the least effective method used for controlling generations of people. It's simply not how true brainwashing is achieved. Not at all. Once people have been successfully brainwashed to believe something, it's very difficult to change your minds, even if you expose them to authentic information. Even if you present proof that what they currently believe is a lie, it is still difficult to change their mindset. Exposure to true information does not mean a thing to them. It means nothing at all. Brainwashed people are often unable to accept truthful information. The facts tell them nothing at all. Even if you shower them with information that proves documented information, pictures, even if you take them by force to show them something other than what they've been brainwashed to believe, they will not accept it. They will refuse to believe it. This therefore presents a daunting challenge to free the minds of our people that have been brainwashed by the white society. White oppressive forces wants to keep Black people brainwashed to believe that our plight is connected to a biblical fairy tale and to believe that our collective mindsets have been shaped by a silly slave syndrome myth. Because they know that as long as our understandings of our plight and condition remains flawed, then all liberating remedies and strategies that stems from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. A people must gain a clear and accurate understanding of their plight and condition in order to liberate themselves. It's a profound task bestowed upon us to liberate the minds of our people, but we must do so. It is one that we must achieve or die trying, because there is no purpose more important for we Africans throughout the diaspora than the emancipation of our collective minds from white mental slavery. The white society's ability to manipulate what we think, believe, and how we behave provides them with their greatest weapon used against us. This is why those of us who know the truth must teach African proverb. We must teach the truth regardless of who it offends. The following are the Black liberating facts of our plight and condition that white oppressive forces fears the day Black people ever learn and understand. Unlike at the conclusion of World War II, when the Jewish Holocaust ended and the US and the UN contributed massive financial supports to rebuild the lives of the Jews, there was no moral obligation to do the same for we Africans. For although the African Holocaust lasted hundreds of years longer and resulted in millions of more deaths and more greatly decimated the African culture, when slavery was abolished, America, Great Britain, and many other white nations that benefited from their brutal exploitation of Africans felt no moral obligation to restore the African culture. They instead focused on their own self-interest by socializing Africans. Socialized is when the oppressors exploit their monopoly over information that are systematically fed into the collective minds of the oppressed to manipulate the oppressed to think and behave in ways that are against their own self-interest and that instead serve the interests of their oppressors. It's the true hidden reason why many black people now perceive ourselves as being our own worst enemies and reveres and defends Caucasians in spite of such a brutal history to the contrary. The collective aggressions of the black masses have been deliberately shifted away from the white society and redirected against ourselves through the white society's monopoly over information that we receive. This noted mindset amongst many black people clearly benefits the white society. Whenever the oppressed starts thinking in ways that benefits the oppressors, it's always because they've been socialized to do so. White social scientists describe this nefarious practice as merely instilling a value system into the collective subconscious minds of black people that makes us adhere to the authority and existing infrastructure of the white dominant society. There are 4 ways to effectively socialize an entire generation of people: by what we're taught, by what we see, by what we hear, and through repetition. Because the white society controls the education we're taught, the media images that we see, and the societal narratives that we repetitively hear, they've exploited these combined factors to covertly socialize the collective minds of black people to think in ways that benefits the white society without most of us even realizing what's being done to us. This is not some feeble-minded conspiracy theory, as so many of our people have been socialized to respond. It's the hidden truth that white oppressive forces don't want black people to ever learn. The enslaved Africans of the 21st century are those who cannot overcome the white society's socializing of our minds. The truth has finally come forward, but they've conditioned millions of us to fear it and to hate those who speak it. Many Africans throughout the diaspora are afraid to learn the truth or learn to accept the truth because of the inherent call for action that comes with accepting the truth. They therefore instead cling to their biblical fairy tales and the silly slave syndrome myth that keeps us complacent, stagnant, and mentally enslaved, and therefore keeping us within the good graces of our oppressors. When we do this, we become the wardens of our own mental prisons. The Bible was the first propaganda literature used to socialize the minds of Africans. Many black people have been socialized to complacently wait for Jesus to come and rescue us. However, the Bible was the first literature used to socialize Africans. This is an absolute fact. We were socialized to think and behave that benefits the white society through the Bible. Case, point, and proof. The early white Christians' conversion of Africans into their religion had nothing whatsoever to do with saving the souls of Africans so that Africans could join them in heaven during the afterlife. This is an irrefutable fact because the early white Christians believed that Africans weren't humans, that Africans had no souls, and that heaven was for whites only. They in fact believed that the thought of an African entering heaven was as ridiculous as a dog doing so. This is absolute fact. When we logically look at facts as they truly were, we can say with 100% certainty that the white enslavers' conversion of Africans into their religion had absolutely nothing to do with saving the souls of Africans. There was another self-serving reason why these racist enslavers put their time and energy into teaching Christianity to a people they otherwise treated so brutally. The reason was to indoctrinate the belief of a white God into their minds. When the African was taught through Christianity to worship a white God, this produced a profound adoration towards whiteness within their minds. This subconsciously happens without most even realizing it. This profound adoration of whiteness is then transferred and transposed on a subconscious level onto white people. This made the colonized and enslaved Africans more subservient towards the white colonizers and enslavers. Therefore, Christianity greatly facilitated the white society's colonization of Africans and enslavement of Africans. The effects of that white revering brainwashing scheme implemented over 400 years ago has been left uncorrected and unremoved for generations. Many black Christians insist that Christianity was originally practiced by black people in Ethiopia. However, this is untrue. In reality, the Roman Emperor Constantine created the false religion in the year 325 AD. Christianity did not become the official religion of Ethiopia until the reign of King Zana in 341. That's 16 years after the white Romans created the false religion. Christianity is not the belief system practiced by Africans before the year 325 AD. Furthermore, through Christianity, millions of black people have been brainwashed to believe that all of the wrongs that the white society have done to us throughout history have been washed away clean and forgiven by the blood of a fictional Jesus. Africans were brutally forced to become Christians. And then his doctrine was used to compel Africans to forgive whites for the brutality inflicted upon us as the religion dictates. Now note, the white society never actually repent nor evil ask for forgiveness for their evil deeds committed against black people. They merely insist that black people as good Christians forgive them as their doctrine dictates. Furthermore, by teaching black people that a white God sent down his white son to die for us, this literally makes millions of black people feel indebted to the white society. Christianity has proven itself as being one of history's most successful propaganda tools used for socializing the minds of Africans. During the 1960s, it was determined that the socializing of Africans throughout the diaspora needed to be reinforced unrelentingly through ongoing propaganda campaigns. The history and reason. During the 1960s, African Americans' unified protest against the U.S. system of white supremacy was unprecedented. African Americans confronted it on all fronts. It was confronted through civil disobedient tactics, militant means, nonviolent protests, and with black lawyers pleading for equality with America's highest Supreme Court. African Americans' unified protest still remains unrivaled by any other group in U.S. history. African Americans had unknowingly proven themselves as being the greatest threat against the U.S. system of white supremacy. In the face of the unprecedented unified black protests, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover said that the unification of the American Negro was the greatest threat against the nation. To remedy what was then called the Negro problem, in 1967, President Lyndon Johnson put together a committee called the Kerner Commission. Their assignment was to study the Negro problem, find the cause of the problem, and then develop a solution. In 1968, white social scientists hired by the Kerner Commission determined that an aggravating core factor for that decade's unprecedented unified black protests was caused by an elevated and unifying black collective self-esteem brought on by the emergence of the Black Pride movement. They also learned then that while oppressors, through their weaponry advantage of guns and cannons, can brutally invade and enslave a people, they, however, cannot win those people's loyalty or sustain peace with those people indefinitely unless these people's minds have been manipulated to think in ways that prevents them from unifying against their oppressors. Because they learned that whenever people are oppressed for long durations, their collective aggressions against their oppressors will continue to grow until it reaches a boiling point, until massive acts of rebellion against the oppressors becomes inevitable. The oppressed always eventually rebels against their oppressors. This is an inherent response within the collective human psyche whenever people are being oppressed for long durations. This is what was actually happening amongst African Americans during the 1960s. White racism had reached a boiling point within the collective minds of the African American population, which resulted in that decade's unprecedented unified black protests. Those white social scientists logically determined that they could subdue unified black protests by deploying an ideological subversion system that keeps the collective self-esteem of the black masses very low and that shifts black collective aggressions away from the white society and redirects it towards ourselves. They determined that they could achieve both of these objectives through propaganda campaigns that keeps black people believing the fraudulent worst about ourselves. The white media's unrelenting negative depictions of black people that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality is much more than just biased media reporting. It is actually an insidious black racially demoralizing divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. Demoralize, divide, and rule is a method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hate and division between them. It is a well-documented and well-proven social psychological warfare tactic used for controlling targeted populations. Whenever those in power wants to brainwash a targeted population to think and behave as they want them to, they always heavily demoralize them. This divides them, makes them self-loathing, and makes them much more easier to control. This is precisely the psychological warfare tactic that white oppressive forces currently deploys against black people. It is the truth of our plight and condition. This psychological warfare system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects black people to receiving only the fraudulent worst narratives about ourselves. Within this system, fraudulent black racially demoralizing propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting minds of the black population without being challenged nor counterbalanced by an equal amount of black positive racially affirming information. It conveys a subliminal message that black people are now our own worst enemies and we therefore need whites to govern over our lives. Moreover, that black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. This system is extremely effective because when black people are repetitively presented these noted narratives from trusted white media sources, it can be very difficult to resist its implied propaganda programming, especially when the propaganda is being told daily and so unrelentingly. Its weapon is the demoralizing message that it carries and the way that it adversely affects the black population in terms of our behaviors. With time, being unable to refute the constant negative, demoralizing information about us, many black people eventually comes to accept it and internalize it. The constant taunting of negative propaganda unconsciously influences how many black people perceives ourselves, creating division and self-hatred among us. It also shifts black collective aggressions away from the white society and redirects it towards ourselves. This is the truth of our plight and condition. The ultimate goal is to demoralize black people to such an extent that we begin to doubt our own ability to govern ourselves and believe that we therefore need whites to govern over our lives. Moreover, it makes us believe that we're better off living under white dominance, and therefore we abandon all hopes of ever liberating ourselves. It also creates black self-hatred and disunity, which attacks the core foundation of what bonds us as a people, and we can then be ruled over forever. The basis of this concept of warfare works by affecting the subconscious minds of the black population through demoralizing propaganda. It works by tapping into the immense power that shame has upon the human mind. to mentally enslave black people. If you doubt that this is what's being done to black people by white oppressive forces, it's only because you're not critically thinking. Because it's in fact so obvious that it's only by not critically thinking that it cannot be seen. When critically thinking, can you not see just how cartoonishly unrealistic it actually is? That virtually all information that we receive from white sources are consistently negative and black racially demoralizing? It's cartoonishly unrealistic. It's actually a black racially demoralizing, divide and conquer psychological warfare propaganda used to shape our minds in ways that serve the system of white supremacy. Those black people who do not critically think and question the validity of all information that they receive from white sources are the ones that become self-hating, demoralized, divided, and therefore mentally enslaved by the white society. Not all wars are fought on the battlefield. Most are fought in the minds. Through the skillful, sustained use of repetitive media propaganda, white oppressive forces have created a psychological prison for the minds of black people. This is all possible because people are like computers. All you have to do is keep giving people certain information over and over, and you can persuade an entire generation towards an implied objective. This is our hidden reality. And it doesn't matter if the information presented is untrue. Most black people will act upon the information because they've all been given the same disinformation about ourselves. This psychological warfare system provides the white society with a more proficient method for controlling black people. For unlike the past blatant racist systems that black people could easily identify and therefore develop counter strategies against, this system is not easily recognized nor is it easily comprehended by its black victims. This psychological warfare program works so well, in fact, that it not only makes black people more compliant with white dominance over our lives, it in many cases causes black people to prefer it. It is the reason why many black people are now self-loathing, perceives ourselves as being our own worst enemies, and reveres Caucasians in spite of a brutally horrific history to the contrary. The problem has never been a silly slave syndrome myth. This is why that mindset of what we call the slave syndrome exists among black people who are not descendants of enslaved Africans. We are being controlled through the white society's ongoing monopoly over information that we receive. The oppressor's depiction of the oppressor is never a true one. It's always negatively distorted to serve the hidden agendas of the oppressors. This fact has remained consistent throughout history and is still true now. Those of us who know the truth must teach. African proverb. It is time to elevate our minds. It's time to recognize the war that's been waged against us. And it's time to wake up to our reality. We must emancipate ourselves from white mental slavery, and none but ourselves can do so. Brothers and sisters, it's time to wake up. One love and peace.